But I just wanted to introduce Jay. Jay is the head of winemaking. I don't know if you guys are aware of it. Jay Turnipseed. We have a new winemaker that is joining Jay, which is Mark. They're here on the call. So just maybe we should just start with a brief history of Rutherford wine or Round Hill, and then we can pass it over to Jay and Mark, and they can kind of talk about Rutherford Ranch. So the story of Rutherford Wine Company started with Round Hill, as you may know. It was created by a husband and wife, Ernie and Virginia, back in the 70s, 1978. And they were farmers in the Napa Valley that also had liquor stores and a handful of restaurants throughout Northern California. And at the time in the 70s, they were growing grapes and then just selling them to the market. I think Ernie decided that profit was a must, and so he decided to bottle his own wine, which was called Round Hill. And he called it Round Hill because him and his wife used to vacation in Jamaica at the resort of Round Hill, which is still there in Jamaica. It's a high-end resort on the island. They decided to bottle Round Hill throughout the 80s. In the mid-80s, the Zaninovich family, which is the current family, they were investors in Round Hill. And I think after, Daniel? Yes.
Hey, I have a couple of slides that might help. Can I show a couple of slides while you're talking?
Sure.
So I'll just pick up where Daniel left off. Ernie and his wife Virginia were growing grapes, as Daniel said, in 1978, and so they were bottling wine that was bulk wine purchase, and they were crushing grapes and making wine at the facility, the first Round Hill facility. And then in 1986, Ernie and his wife Virginia found the property where the winery is currently at, which is where Mark and I are sitting currently. There was not a winery here at the time. There was a vineyard planted along with a bunch of old olive trees that are now currently over 100 years old. So when Ernie and his wife purchased this facility, they designed and built the winery as it stands today. And then they moved in. At the time, Round Hill was still California appellated. So this is our timeline that shows the beginning of Round Hill in 1978. In 1986, they moved into the facility here where Mark and I are located. And the family that currently owns Rutherford Wine Company and the Rutherford Ranch Winery, their last name is Zaninovich. Okay, so let me just go back at another slide here real quickly. So up here at the top, Zaninovich is their last name. They have been farming in the state of California since the 1930s, the late 1930s. Most of what they did was raisins and table grapes in the southern part of California, down near a town called Bakersfield, or Delano to be more specific. The first generation of the family grew the business, increased their acreage and land holdings, and then the second generation took over by the gentleman. His name is Marco, and his wife Theo Zaninovich. So they actually grew the business quite tremendously. They branched out into wine grapes and also wineries. So the winery where Mark and I work and the wines that Daniel sells are all bottled here at this facility. Okay, this is the third of three wineries that the family owns. And then you don't know the names of the other two because their business model is different than what we do. We are branded product for distribution, whereas they make wine for other people. Okay. Now, if you look here in the center of the slide where it says in the year 2000, Marco and Theo Zaninovich took over the Round Hill cellars. So what ended up happening was Marco and Theo were traveling around the state, as they often do, to look for really beautiful and really wonderful vineyard land. They know vineyards like the back of their hand. They've been a farming family for at that point 2 generations, and they were raising the 3rd generation. So in 1982, they purchased their first vineyard here in Napa Valley. They started selling grapes from that vineyard to Ernie at Round Hill, and that's how the connection was made between Round Hill Cellars and the Rutherford Wine Company, okay, or the Zaninovich family. Okay, so they were selling grapes from 1982 all the way into the year 2000 when Ernie approached the Van Asperen family, and they made a deal to purchase the winery and the vineyard that's attached here to the winery. Okay, so there were a couple of things that were happening at that point. Ernie and also the Zaninoviches were understanding the significance of Napa Valley from a farming standpoint. So because this farming family is so good at selecting vineyards, they came to Napa Valley and understood that Rutherford, which is a sub-appellation in Napa Valley, was the best place in the valley to grow Cabernet grapes. And so that's how they decided on their first vineyard selection, which is just a half a mile up the road from where we are currently. And they really wanted to start focusing their energy around Napa Valley because it is so special here. And so in 2005, the Rutherford Ranch Winery, the name on the front of the building changed from Round Hill to Rutherford Ranch. Okay, and that's essentially where we start to think about the beginnings of our business. One of the things that's really important to us as a business that the 3rd generation, so Marco and Theo's 3 boys are now running the business. In the pictures here, I'm in the top picture, I'm the one on the left holding the wine thief, and Morgan and I are doing some barrel tasting in this photo. And then the one below, Morgan and I are looking at some Sauvignon Blanc grapes that were just harvested. That was a couple of years ago. But Morgan is a very hands-on owner. And, you know, this farming family really understands vineyards. And so what we try and do with the Rutherford Ranch brand is really accentuate in a glass of wine what Napa Valley is from a grape growing standpoint. And we'll get into that here in just a second. But let me just introduce Mark Zachariah. Mark is helping take over some of the daily winemaking stuff. He's going to take over some of those responsibilities and work with Kaylin Crivello, who is our assistant winemaker. She's going to work directly with Mark on the day-to-day function of the cellar. Now, because this family has acreage all over the state, I have another slide that will show you a little bit what I'm talking about. So this family owns acreage all over the state, and they have wineries in other parts of California that we work very closely with. Their land holdings are much larger than 130 acres, which is listed on this slide. But for the purposes of the wines that we make for the Rutherford Wine Company, so that's all of the brands combined, we think about 130 acres is what we use for our own wines and our production, okay, that come through this winery here in Napa Valley, in the Rutherford sub-appellation to be more specific. But you know, we'll try and get you this presentation so that you can see it and so that you can share it with people, but you can see kind of where we're distributed for the wines that we make here out of the Rutherford Ranch Winery are mostly in the coastal areas of California. And then we do a little bit of work out of with some vineyards in Lodi, as well as in different parts of the state, okay? Now, so Daniel asked me to specifically talk a little bit about Napa Valley because, you know, as a brand, the Rutherford Ranch brand is our Napa Valley brand that we think of as the crown jewel of our portfolio, because Napa Valley is a very, very special place from a geology and a geography standpoint. And I want to be able to sort of communicate that to everybody because it's very, very different place to grow grapes. And if some of these features weren't here, Napa Valley would not be known for Cabernet. It would be known for something else, okay? And I'll explain that as I get into it. So Napa Valley is essentially a valley that is flat in the middle, and it's got 2 very tall peaks on both sides. okay? And it's very steep. Okay, so this is a narrow valley that's roughly about, 5 miles wide at its widest point. And it's only 30 miles long from the town of Napa all the way up to the top of this slide, in a little north of a town called Calistoga. So these sets of red lines are essentially the mountain boundaries of what is Napa Valley. Okay, and these are very, very important to the quality of the wines that are made here, and I'll explain here in just a second. So the mountain range that's on the left-hand side or to the west is the Mayacamas mountain range, and then the one to the east is the Vaca range. Okay, so those two mountain ranges help keep the cold air that comes off of the San Francisco Bay or the San Pablo Bay, which is to the very far south or the very bottom of this photo, an extension of the San Francisco Bay, which has direct access to the Pacific Ocean. And so that brings in cold air off of the coast. And the yellow arrow indicates airflow up and down the valley. So what you get is very warm days here with cool evenings. And Cabernet loves that sort of temperature shift. So in the morning, when we wake up here in Napa, it's always 58 degrees Fahrenheit. And then during the growing season, it's always in the upper 90s. So this big shift in temperature from daytime high to nighttime low is what makes Cabernet do so very well here. Now, if either one of these two mountain ranges weren't here, so if the Mayacamas range wasn't here, we'd be talking today about Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. If that one were still here and the Vaca range was not there, we'd be talking about Zinfandel, okay? Because those two mountain ranges are there and the San Francisco Bay opens up to the bottom part of the valley. The weather conditions are absolutely perfect for warm days and cool nights, which is what Cabernet loves the most. Okay, so I used Google Earth to give you just a couple of pictures of what this kind of looks like, so that, if you have not been to Napa Valley, this will give you a little bit of a sense for what it looks like. So this is a picture from Google Earth, and the elevation of where the camera is at is probably about 150 feet off the ground. And so this picture is looking northwest. So the big peak in the background is Mount St. Helena. And so this is a picture sort of taken from right in the middle of the valley in Rutherford, where the winery is at. So the important key features of this are a very flat valley floor and two mountain ranges on both sides. The one on the left to the west is the Mayacamas range, and the one on the right is the Vaca range. Okay. Now, here's a picture looking due west. So you can see very flat valley floor with a mountain range, and that mountain range is what holds that cold air into the center part of the valley. Same thing to the east. So this is looking due east, another mountain range. And so between this slide and this slide, you can see that this valley is very narrow because the picture is taken from essentially the same vantage point. I just turned the camera around. So at this point in the valley, which is a little bit south of where we are currently, is only about 3.5 to 4 miles wide. But look at how tall it is, okay? Those two features are what keep that cold air in. Now looking south toward the town of Napa and the town of Vallejo, you can see that this is a big, broad, open valley as the further south you go. So all this cold air comes in off of the San Francisco Bay from the south, and it works its way up toward the north in Calistoga. And so those features between the north end of this valley, where they come together at a point up there near the town of St. Helena, the two mountain ranges on both sides, and then a very broad open mouth to the valley, this is where all that cold air comes from, okay? That's what makes grape growing here in Napa Valley so very special, okay? And like I said, if those two mountain ranges weren't there, we would not be talking about Cabernet, which is most of the production here at the winery, because Cabernet does so well here. Here is the range of different wines that we sell. Not all of these are export items, but Daniel can talk to you more specifically about the ones that you'll be working with. So I think it's going to be the Cabernet, the Chardonnay, the Merlot, and the Sauvignon Blanc. The others are not exported currently to all markets, and so Daniel, you and Daniel can work that out. But this brand is centered in Napa Valley. Okay, all of the grapes that are used for making all of these wines are Napa Valley grapes. And so this brand, with each of these wines, we are trying to represent what Napa Valley vineyards and the climate can do to generate some of these flavors. If I saw somebody pouring the Sauvignon Blanc, so Sauvignon Blanc from Napa Valley is very lime, citrus, and grapefruit. That's the intent. It is fermented and aged in stainless steel tanks with no oak and no malolactic, so it doesn't have the buttery characteristic, but bright and fresh and clean with just sort of a soft mid palate that can make this wine very, very versatile. So you can have it as a glass of wine at the beach or by the pool, or, you know, just enjoying, you know, a beautiful sunny day in Cancun, or you can pair it with food. Okay. The Chardonnay is a very classic Chardonnay where it's got some fruit characteristic, and it's also got some nice oak, and those two characteristics are balanced quite well, or at least that's our intention as a winemaking team. Because this is a farming family that owns this business, they only purchase and work with grapes that are from some of the best vineyards in the area. And so the intent is to have wines that show fruit characteristic, that show the terroir or the character of those vineyards without having too much oak to cover up the beautiful aromatics and flavors of what the vineyard is producing. The Cabernet and the Merlot are both fantastic representations of what those wines are, especially at their price point. The Napa Valley Cabernet, we're very pleased, just got a 90 points from the Wine Enthusiast and the Wine Spectator, which are good third-party verification that these wines are absolutely delicious and truly represent what Napa Valley Cabernet and Napa Valley Merlot are. So very excited about how these wines are turning out from a winemaking standpoint, and hopefully your customers will be able to see the value in them, because it's hard to find Napa Valley wines at these prices, especially in this quality tier. So it looks like everybody is enjoying a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, I hope.
Yeah, we're pouring the Sauvignon Blanc. I think, well, maybe that would be about the soils. We also hear that Napa Valley has a very interesting set of soils. I don't know if you can maybe deepen in that.
Yeah, so one of the unique things, and I didn't mention it because it's a very involved discussion, but in Napa Valley, because of the geology and the geography that has happened over the last several 100,000 years, we have over 300 different soil types in Napa Valley. Okay, so it's this patchwork of different soils, both from its, you know, the soil parent material and the makeup of what the soil is, all the way to soil depth, slope, and angle. So the Vaca range to the east is mostly volcanic. That mountain range was actually a rift fault in volcanism a long time ago, and the winery here in Rutherford is sitting on a big alluvial fan of volcanic ash, decomposed volcanic ash. So you can find tufa, which is the petrified volcanic ash, all over the vineyard. But if you go to other places in the valley, it's more Franciscan formation, which is sort of a jumble of different soil types that are related to ocean floor crust and old decomposed parent material that was sitting on top of the ocean. So through tectonic plate movements, the the Farallon plate pushed underneath the Pacific plate, and it created mountain ranges, and that's what pushed up the Mayacamas range on the west. And it also created a lot of the hillsides in Sonoma County, which is due west of us, between us and the Pacific Ocean. So with a lot of these things happening all at the same time, there's little patches of different soil types all over the place, because the ground has always been moving for the last couple 100,000 years. And it's created a really unique situation, which is not found in very many places around the world, especially when growing crops, and more importantly, grapes, because that's what we're doing here in this valley. So it's really a very, very special place when it comes to geology as well. I hope that answered the question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you really did. Thank you very much.
Well, if there are no more questions for me, I want to thank you all very much. You know, I can honestly tell you, having worked with the sales team and working with Daniel, selling wine is far more difficult than making wine. Trust me, I've seen both sides. And so all of the hard work that you all put in to get our wines in front of retailers and restaurateurs is very much appreciated. So thank you for everything that you do to help get our wines in front of the customers and be able to open up sales in many different outlets, restaurants, hotels. We really, really do appreciate all of your hard work. So thank you very much.